Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting / open discussion. Today is February 23rd, 2021. And per usual, we get a bunch of status updates. We're going to talk about the roadmap a little. We'll talk about status updates against the roadmap, or rather towards the roadmap. There we go. English, not my first language. And then discussion topics and contributor shoutouts. So with that, let's get started. Bridget.
Hi, everyone. So my focus for this week has been trying to wrap up the multiple credentials support. This is something that we want for 1.6. So I have a number of PRs open. So the first one is for adding support for backup storage locations. Then I have another one which builds on that, which is specifically for adding support for Restic commands. Then I have 3 PRs open for each of the plugins. At the moment, I'm currently running tests against those, and I need to write docs. I verified that all of them are working except for Restic on Azure. So there's some things I need to check out there. And then I'll try and get some end-to-end tests as well for that. There was also an issue that came up on the discussion boards around Restic restores when using namespace mapping. So we got a fix in for that this week, which will go in 1.6, and we'll, as Noel mentioned, on the PR, we'll try and get that into 1.5.4 as well to fix the 1.5 release series. And then we also did a release for the Azure plugin, which included a fix that I think I mentioned last week that I wanted to get a fix. I wanted to get a release out for a fix to do with the Azure plugin not listing everything that was in a bucket, or in a blob storage container. So we've got a release out for that, and that's it for me.
Awesome. Lots of PR goodness. Great stuff. Any questions, comments for Bridget? All right. Next up, Carlisia.
Hello. The download request controller, I think, is in pretty good shape. It has 1 thumbs up from Bridget. Nolan had given a thumbs up, but Bridget found a problem with the test, which showed that I was still a bit confused about making some incorrect assumptions, and I fixed the test setup. And that's it. And that's it for that. And I am looking at an issue with a capi cluster. Then I think I'm going to maybe pause that for a couple hours and do reviews on those PRs from Bridgette, or at least half of them.
What's the issue?
It's so when people are making when people make a backup of one of the cluster, the management cluster is stopped working. I'm still trying to find my way around to even like a happy path for Velero in that environment, because that's new to me. So I can try to replicate and dig into what could possibly, because they are using Velero 1.4. So.
All right. Yeah, that sounds like something that needs to be investigated for sure.
Alicia, is it just a matter of time that you have not gotten to it, or do you want another pair of eyes or help with this?
I do. I was thinking about asking you or Dave. Yeah.
I can help out.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let me know. Well, I have another meeting, but let's touch base on that after. Maybe you can help me today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Awesome. Any other questions, comments for Carlisia? All right, Nolan.
I've been trying to focus on getting reviews out for all of the blockers on 1.6. That link shows we've actually brought this list down pretty far, at least on the Velero core repo. Thanks, Bridget, for getting all that work started across the plugins. I'm continuing to work with Dave to refine the roadmap. From 1.9 out, we may need to adjust stuff, and we're I don't think we're quite happy with it, where everything is at the moment. Some things may need to be moved around, but we were hoping to get that out this week, but that did not happen. And also something I've been taking up that I'd like to get into 1.6, but given time constraints, I may not. Is testing Restic 0.12 on Velero. We're a few versions behind on Restic now, and Restic development has picked up significantly. So we want to test that out, and also there's some dependencies they have in their Go code that could be a security risk. So we're trying to get that updated to basically get rid of those dependencies.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yep.
So you said Restic development and contributions have picked up.
Mm-hmm.
That's great to hear, because I know we were looking into this last year. We saw development that slowed down quite remarkably. So does that change anything with regards to making Restic a kind of a modular part of Velero?
No, I don't think so, because there's lots of different engines that people want to use, and so we want people to be able to swap those out. There's certainly been like traditional backup vendors that want to use Velero, but they want to put their own engine in because they've invested a lot of time and effort in there. So we're looking at Restic and Copia to be candidates. I think Dave's played with Copia some, and I think Ashish did too. But I think our general direction will be moving all of those types of things into a data movement layer, and hopefully that could work in sync with CSI snapshotting.
That sounds good. Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments for Nolan? All right. Dave.
Yeah, so let's see. So as Nolan mentioned, we've been working on the roadmap. That's pretty much that. So as part of our movement towards getting data movement into Velero, I want to get upload progress monitoring into 1.7. And so I have a design doc for that. There's a pull request for that. And I have a meeting scheduled for the 25th, which would be, I believe, Thursday at 9 a.m. And so everybody's welcome to that. The Zoom link is here in the HackMD, and I'll send it out on the mailing list as well. And that's it for me.
Awesome. Can you send out an invite so people have it in their calendars if they want to join?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Nice. Any questions, comments for Dave? All right. Ashish?
For me, I am right now looking into plumbing our current E2E tests that we have into our internal setup at VMware, so that we are running those tests at a regular cadence. So I am doing that. I will also be spending some time today working with Carlisia on that issue she was talking about.
Sounds good.
That's pretty much everything.
Sounds good. Any questions, comments for Ashish? All right, moving into the discussion topics. So I added 2 questions there, and these are questions for the maintainer teams, the maintainer team rather. You are one team, and the community here. So I know previously we had some consistent topics in the discussion topics. We talked about larger breaking changes, things like that. And I was wondering if there's anything like that that we want to add in here, that we want to mention. Not sure if there is, but I want to do a call out here and see if there is something that we should add in here that we should continuously talk about during the community meetings.
So we did have the API changes proposed, and we've that's kind of taken a back seat to some of the other priorities, but I think that would be a good one to add here. Roadmap discussions when we can get it public would be good too. I know our status updates are supposed to be roadmap focused, but if we can, I think Jonas, you and I had talked about, we do a big look at the roadmap at the beginning of the month, and then we kind of update towards that.
Yep, sounds good. Roadmap, beginning of every month, first meeting of every month. We'll take a look at the roadmap and see where we're heading for the current release, and also if there's any work being done on things that will affect other future releases. So breaking changes, I think, would be great to bring up there, and then remind people of them as well. Okay. Another sorry, before I go ahead, any other comments there? Anything else anyone would like to add as a rotating or repeating topic? All right. So we do have a lot of great discussion topics throughout the meetings here. And I think it's worthwhile to kind of look back at the previous week's discussion topic as well, and see if there's any outcomes that we should bring up on the meetings, because we've been having these discussions and then the rest of it happens in GitHub or on Slack, and code is merged and we're done. So we rarely bring up the results of these unless it's a longer discussion. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't actually have any discussion topics last week, but going forward, I want to make sure that we just take a look at the previous week's discussion topics and see if there's any old business that we need to revisit and kind of give a little status report on. Does that sound good? All right, cool. All right, so we got 3 discussion topics here. If anyone wants to add any other discussion topics, I definitely think we have time for that today. So please do so in the HackMD here. First up, we have Nolan.
Yeah, so this one I'm going to keep real short because this is not like an urgent thing. I envision this work not being done until 1.7, and even then it's like a building block. So this design document is aiming to provide extra metadata for Velero to figure out what's in a backup, and using that to do a little bit more sophisticated logic on what we should restore or what we should back up. I listed in this design doc some of the things I think this will enable. So I think it will enable better or better parallelization of backups. So if we can use this manifest data structure to say, hey, what's the overlap between objects on these 2 backups? If there's none, we can just go ahead and do both at the same time. It will enable dry runs by building up the manifest structure. And then when you actually do a backup, you just use the manifest structure. And it will, in the future, enable stuff like graph-based logic for restores. So right now, Velero sorts all of the Kubernetes kinds or API groups in a specific order at the front, and then everything below after that is alphabetical. this would allow us to say what objects does this object need to be restored, and we could restore those first and then kind of work through that way instead of just one at a time. So I'd encourage people to take a look at this. This proposal is just for the data structure, and so we can like start populating it and bump the backup version, backup format version to v1.2. And then in future releases, we can start actually using the stuff in this data structure to make decisions.
Hey, Nolan, where does this fall under the roadmap?
So I think this would fall under a dependency for all of the concurrency stuff, the dry run, and getting support for capi, making support better for capi, because capi specifically was something that kind of triggered my thoughts here. So I view it as a dependency for those three features and maybe more. So I'm thinking this is getting the data structure would be a 1.7 or a 1.8. But I also don't want to implement it until we like have a good discussion around it, because given how many things I think could use it, I would like to get the data structure right.
I have a question. So will this enable to run concurrent backups in Velero?
The data structure will let us have the information we need to do that. But this design itself does not bring concurrent backups. But if we can build this manifest of each backup and then say, okay, what objects are in each? Do they overlap? If they have any overlap, then we'll do it serially. If they have no overlap, then we could do concurrent.
Okay.
This is all data we have now in the backup tarball, but it's not in a convenient and usable format. We'd have to like read in every single JSON file. So this basically lets us collapse a lot of the identifying information about objects. So name, namespace, API group version, labels, and annotations. So that's all we should need to identify an object. We don't need the whole JSON.
I see you're talking about dry runs here. Would this enable dry runs?
Yes. So my thought for dry runs is we would simply build the manifest and return it. So we would say, here's all the things I matched. It may be a super long list, but by returning that, we basically dry runs fall out of it. The thing I have a question on in the design still is whether or not we want to enable something like I run a dry run and then, okay, just back up that dry run. But I think that can be answered in the implementation phase for the dry run. I think just enhancing the Velero backup code to start building this manifest is step one. And this is like inspired by some of this is inspired by what Pranav did with the restore procedure, restore progress. And this is a thing that I've been thinking about for a long time with Velero, is how do we make it graph-based instead of just doing things one by one? Because that's bugged me for a long time.
Yeah, and actually thinking about this, something we could consider here is like the output of the dry run would be like a manifest or a JSON. We could also have an option to do a backup based on a JSON. And then we can cut down on the number of filters and so forth that we're building into Velero and let people build their own filters around the manifest, and the same on restore.
Yeah, I could see that if we do a dry run, we just return the manifest to them, and they could provide that as input. And if you want to do client-side filtering on that, you could.
Hi, this is Rafael.
Yeah.
Are you envisioning have a new CRD for that, like a backup dry run?
So no, this will
Okay.
be exclusively for Valero's internal use. So I envision this as a file that just gets put in the object store. We actually have a file there right now that you can get if you do Velero backup describe details that has like a list of everything in there. But this in time would replace that file. And that file is built kind of differently than what I envisioned here. It only has, it doesn't have enough identifying information to serve as what we want. It doesn't have labels. It doesn't have owner references, things like that, which we would need to build a graph.
Okay.
And I envision on talking about this more. Like I just want to bring this to people's attention. I'm sure we'll have some one-offs on this and talk about it some more. But I just wanted to let folks know this is early. Please come at it, ask questions, poke holes. Some of the naming I'm not super happy with, but yeah, certainly looking for feedback because I view this as being an enabler for a lot of other stuff that we want to do for Velero.
This is really cool. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, Nolan. Moving on to Frankie and Rafael.
All right, that's cool. You memorized my GitHub user handle.
Of course.
Very flattered. So for this one, it's very, very easy to get into the weeds, and I don't really want to do that in a community discussion. But to understand what's happening, imagine two different scenarios. One where you have one resource, but it fits in multiple groups. All right, well, let me do a review on what is a resource and what is a group before continuing, because I always get this confused. I think the example I like to use is deployments. You know, we know that deployment, singular, is a kind. It is in the, it is a deployments resource, right? And then the group that deployments is in is called apps. All right, well, what if deployments was in two different groups instead of just apps? What if it was in something else? Well, this actually happened to us with ingresses. Ingresses is the resource, ingress is the kind, and then the group that ingress is in currently, pre 1.22, is extensions. That's one of the extensions is a group. It's also in the group called networking.kates.io. So hopefully everyone's following. We got one resource that's in two groups. So how do you deal with that? And by the way, this can happen with CRDs too. As soon as people start creating their own resources, they could name it whatever they want. You know, Rafael, he created a resource called rock bands. It's in the music.example.io. Well, I liked Rafael's idea. So I have my own domain. It's called frankie.io. And I create a resource called rock bands as well. Same thing. And then I say mine's different. Mine's rockbands.frankie.io. You know, how does Velero deal with this resource being in multiple groups? And the reason why we came across this issue is because, you know, here, thanks Jonas for bringing up this bug, which I wonder if it's a bug now. We have a workaround that turns out it works pretty well. But maybe the wording should be changed. But in the plugin, when you make a custom plugin, you can create a section called applies to. But before I continued, is there any questions, or Raphael, should I have mentioned something else?
I do have a question, and
Yes.
it sounds like there's two different cases here. So one is it's actually the same object, really truly, but it's been moved between groups because of like one group has been deprecated.
Exactly.
And,
You
so
got
that's
it.
case A,
That's case A.
right? And then case B, you have two resources that have the same name, for example, Rock Band, but they're not the same object.
They're completely different.
Yeah, so those are two pretty different cases.
Exactly. And the only thing they have in common is that resource and kind names.
Yes, but the group is there specifically to distinguish the two different
Distinguish
types.
them.
So
Agreed.
the second case, do we need to worry about that?
We haven't really played with the second case, and that's one, and that was one of the reasons why we brought up in discussion, is to see if Velero, if the Velero team might consider this a big problem. Maybe it's not. I'm not, priority wise, we're not quite sure where it fits.
How do you tell the difference between that case and the previous case?
Good question.
Yeah, let me jump in. Frank, I think your explanation was good. The case A, you have the same group, the same object, which happens to belong to different groups, but it's the same UUID object. And the way that Velero took care of it, let's use the Ingress, because Ingress is a native object of Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is in charge how to deprecate API groups on that object or not. So what we do see in the Velero backup, two backups of the same object in different folders, right? Because the first folder we have is the resource and the API group. So for our case, our plugin case, our workaround or our solution on the plugin, instead of just say ingress, we specify ingress.extensions and ingress.networking.kubernetes.io, so that we can manage the logic. So the plugin is going to be executed twice for the same object. We're going to handle that. So this is kind of under control, I guess, because it's an object that belongs to, is the same object belonging to two API groups. The restore gonna kick in twice. It's gonna see the object existed. It was restored on the first pass, on the second pass, you're gonna ignore. Y'all good on that one?
I think.
Go ahead.
Well, so what I was going to suggest when Jonas had the code up was fully qualifying the name. So like you just said, Raphael, you specify the name, all the way up through that. I think, but I need to find examples. I think the Velero resource selector is smart enough that you can list multiple groups. But I think in your case, you really only want to do that if the objects are equivalent. So if I have this ingress and it's in two groups, I want to make sure it's ignored. But what about stuff that's not in both groups, right? Like, so what if there's an ingress and only one? Should we also ignore it?
Can I ask a question here? So
yeah,
I think what I'm hearing is we have an object that is identified by a UUID, correct?
Yeah.
That object in Kubernetes in the API server actually has two resources that point to the same UUID.
Yes.
So it's not as though, so from the Kubernetes point of view, there's two objects.
From the API perspective, yes. So it's very similar what the work we've done with the webhooks, with the multiple API groups. Is the same object, but has different views of the same object.
Yeah, so from the Kubernetes point of view, there's two resources. It's like if you made, I don't know if you could even do this, but you construct you can do things like construct two PVs that have the same volume handle. That'll probably do bad things, but I don't think anything actually checks to make sure you can't do that. And those would actually be, and you could probably construct two ingresses that are not different groups, but that have the same UUID. The controller might prevent you from doing that.
It's gonna bump you if you try to create. So you can create an ingress.extension and one namespace with name. Then you try to create ingress.networking on the same namespace with the same name, gonna bump you.
But forget about the different groups. Make it in the same group. I think you could construct it where you have two objects pointing at the same UUID.
You cannot use, you cannot submit an object to the Kubernetes server with a UUID. It assigns those.
Except like PVs with static provisioning, right?
No, it'll make the UUID.
The
Kubernetes UUID.
The volume handle though, right?
Oh yeah, the volume handle is different from the Kubernetes UUID.
So do we get two objects here with the same? So is the UUID like the Kubernetes
UUID is the same. So the view is almost like you have different API group versions, right? Remember that you can create kind of webhooks, and this behind the scenes webhooks about Ingress particularly is part of Kubernetes.
I think I'm trying to understand, because I think Nolan is talking about a API server UUID, which is unique within the API server. And my thinking would be that would be unique for each object that's created, unless there's some magic going on in there.
There's magic going on. So what Raphael's describing is, this is a Kubernetes object that has the same, it's one UUID, it's one object, but it can be presented. You can query it through both API endpoints.
Exactly.
So the YAML is going to be the same.
No, not necessarily.
Actually not.
So who actually owns this actual object that's returned? So it's not simply an etcd entry.
It's Kubernetes API server.
It's so all this logic back and forth at extensions and networking is handled by the Kubernetes API.
There's compatibility layers. Yeah, there's compatibility layers in the API server.
It could also be an aggregated API server, right?
Yep. Yeah. An aggregated API server, which is not the Kubernetes API server.
Right. So it could be something that outside of that scope, I guess, is what I just wanted to throw it out there.
But one thing that I haven't seen yet in this particular case, what is the preferred group if it's an extension or networking? Actually, when you do kubectl get ingresses without specifying the API group, it returns extension. So kind of give a hint, the extension is, for the lack of a better term, preferred group name.
Okay, so going back to our original thing, we had two cases we'd identified. One was that there's like a deprecated thing and a current thing.
That's a great segue. Yeah.
Two different, people just happen to name their objects the same thing.
Can I share my screen very quick?
Yeah, is the second case possible?
Yeah, so we just tested right now. Let me share my screen. So we have these rock bands, okay? So I had a rockbands.musicexample.io. I tweaked and I create rockbands.cbgb.io. I'm a big fan of punk rock, so CBGB is a temple, used to be. And then now I have, if I run kubectl API resources and I grab for rock, I got two CRDs, okay? They are completely different schema, but the kind happens to be rock bands, but they have one is CBGB, other is music.example.io. What happened after I created my second rock band?
What's the UUID on those two objects?
Oh, they're different. Oh, actually, I haven't even, they're completely.
I should hope so. So I think we've got two really different cases, right?
I thought we were done on the first case.
Well, the second case doesn't seem like a case, really. I mean, there's going to be name collisions. That's the whole point of group and kind.
Yes, yes. But the raise awareness of the point of this conversation after the name collision, when I just do get rock bands, I don't get anything else. Right? I was getting, hey, get me rock bands. I got my Beatles here. But then after I create my other rock band, rock bands by itself, my command line doesn't find Beatles anymore. So that's it's awareness conversation here. And for the community, always use the fully qualified name of your resources.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting out of this, because this will happen sometimes on, I can't remember if you fixed this, but there was a case where if you did kubectl get backup, like for Velero, it would say, oh, I don't know what that is. But then you say kubectl get Velero or backup.velero.io, then it gives you everything. So I think this boils down to some of the stuff that the API server or aggregated API server does behind the scenes. CRDs can register to say, hey, my short name is Rock Band. But if two of them do it, kubectl just says, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, which I kind of expect. Built-ins like ingresses, well, it's not really a built-in, but it's close. I think they get slightly special rules, but they're trying to follow more rules. So yeah, in this case, Velero observed the exact same object through two different filters, essentially. It saw an ingress.extension and an ingress.networking. Kubernetes can store different fields for those. I'm not super familiar with that, but in Velero, we basically manifested it as two completely different JSON files. And then when we were doing our matching, we had the same issue that kubectl said, where if you just gave me ingress, okay, I'm gonna get everything that says ingress. Is that summary helpful or more confusing?
I think was helpful. It was more like a raise awareness to the community, and
Well, the second case, so like on restore, we have two objects with the same UUID. So, but we can't specify the UUID. So when we create object A, that presumably, like if we create it in the deprecated space, that presumably also creates the same object, or the same object suddenly appears in the new space. And then we create the object in the new space, but that's actually a different object because we didn't specify UUID. So now we get two in both namespaces.
Oh yeah, you're right. On restore, Velero rips the UUID out.
I mean, it can't. We just said that we can't specify, right?
Right. We do rip it out because of that. So this graph API may help us.
Yeah, exactly. Because we'd have to sort it and find in the backup items with the same UUID, and like pick one to restore would be nice.
Right. So we could use some of the logic that Frankie and Raphael have developed for what's the right version, what's the right group for this version of Kubernetes. Like if you're restoring to the old thing, maybe the deprecated one's preferred. If you go to a newer version of Kubernetes, the new form is preferred if you have both.
Yeah, that sounds good. Now my dilemma is, should I close this bug ticket, because it's actually working pretty well for us once we fully use a fully qualified name. It just wasn't obvious when you reading the documentation or even reading the. If Jonas, if you could show that bug ticket again. If you look at that applies to, if you scroll up. There applies to the function, applies to, we put the word, first of all, we put ingress in there, which is a kind, but it works. Included resources seems to indicate you should just make a string, a slice of resource strings, but really it could be fully qualified names, and that's what will fix it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that was it. That was it.
I think at least for the immediate term, we can better document the resource selector. because like I'm looking at included resources here, and yeah, it's a slice of strings. So you could make the same plugin apply to both fully qualified names. Since it's a slice, I looked really quickly in our code, and we don't do that too many places. Actually,
we tested it out. You can absolutely have two strings there, and that's what ended up working for us. Is we had the first string be ingress dot extensions, and then the second one was actually it was ingresses dot networking dot cates.io. So having both, it worked for us. That was the workaround.
okay.
It wasn't clear to us in the beginning that that was allowed when you know, under the term included resources. So
Yeah,
let everyone know, just use the fully qualified name if you're having problems.
sounds like a good developer documentation thing, because I don't think resource selector that type is very well documented.
Yeah, we might even want to just say, like, you got to use a fully qualified name.
Yeah.
Maybe you can
because
use this
it's pretty
ticket
easy to
for a
shoot
PR.
yourself.
Just to change on the documentation, and there we go.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Maybe the fix for this bug is just to update documentation.
Yeah, I think ultimately we're going to need to be a little. It's really easy to write yourself a backup item action, and we're starting to recommend these and try to make this easier for people. And saying, yeah, you know, just write one for yours, and if you make one and it works, but then somebody else likes rock bands, and all of a sudden you're starting having problems in the field, that's really not fun.
Right.
So yeah, I think we should document it and then also put in, like, change this to, you know, fully qualified names before there's too many existing plugins out there that rely on behavior
Definitely.
of not fully qualified names.
Unfortunately, rock is dead. So hip hop, I think that's going to be a lot of.
Nerdcore all the way.
And by the way, what happens here when we specify ingress for applies to, it does not address both groups. It chooses one, the extensions, and moves on. And it mattered to us because we asked that the skip restore was true for ingresses, but yet it kept being restored. Well, the ingresses.extensions was being skipped as per instructions, but the ingresses.networking.case.io was not being skipped and getting restored. That's where we encountered our problem. So that's it for me in this discussion.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing this up. So the end result of this is to improve the documentation.
Yes, I'll write the workaround in this ticket, and then in this issue, and then I'll go ahead and update. I'll go ahead and write documentation for it in order to close this issue.
And perhaps adding a little comment on the plugin example. I don't know, you know, maybe regular documentation and a couple comments over there on the template.
Yeah, actually, the shared UUID actually has me more worried than this one.
Yeah, we can talk about that some more separately, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to lose it.
Yeah, it is definitely a thing Kubernetes supports, and there's multiple use cases for it, but yeah.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Frankie, for writing out documentation for this.
Yep, no problem.
All right, we have one more discussion topic for Dave.
Yeah, so we've been getting some requests of customers who are setting up like a full-blown man-in-the-middle proxy, MITM proxy on the way for everything going out of their network. And they're having some issues with setting up the certificates. They found like a bug in the Velero code where we're not using the specified certificate everywhere to override things. I just wanted to see if anybody had any experience with using outbound proxies in their environment, you know, what they felt were best practices. You know, it's just kind of looking for some, if anybody's doing anything with it. If not, you know, we'll muddle through. So it sounds like nobody's crazy enough to do that.
Well, I have a lot of experience for inbound proxy, but not outbound.
Yeah, so they're like routing everything through this proxy, and there's like the HTTP certificates, of course, don't work because it is literally a man-in-the-middle attack. And so they want to override the certificate. And I'm just trying to figure out how common that's going to be for people, and what, whether we should support, like in this case, one possibility is I'm probably going to point them in the direction of using the S3 URLs rather than trying to use the domain name setup, because we test the S3 URL certificate override with Minio. And if this is going to be a really uncommon case, then I don't want us to add like another test case that we can't test, or we'd have to build environments that have this outbound man-in-the-middle proxy to test overriding the certificate everywhere, because it has to work not just in the object store plugin, it has to work in the whatchamacallit, in Restic. It might even have to work in the volume snapshotter, depending on what they've managed to do.
So when you say that they're pushing all the traffic to the outbound proxy, does that mean they are overwriting the URLs to go through that proxy? Like,
no, they're
yes.
intercepting everything on the way out. So I'm not sure exactly how it works, but the idea is that all network traffic will go through this thing.
So it's not that they're
everybody.
using the, yeah, so it's not that they're using the HTTP and HTTPS proxy variables and pushing them, are using those, that you're saying that they actually are grepping all that traffic and are capturing all that traffic and then sending it on, and okay, interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like a bad idea, but customers, right?
Huh. I figure you should be more explicit than that, but okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking to see, if anybody has any experience with, real world, like, hey, oh yeah, we see this all the time. Oh, nobody ever does that. Because to me, it's like I don't think that's a good idea, but I can't say from actual experience. I mean, if all the Fortune 500 companies do it, we're gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah, like I know for OpenShift at least, we have a global proxy thing that you're able to set up, and that will you can also set up like an SSL cert inside that global proxy that will allow everything to go talk to that global proxy with that SSL cert to verify. Like, so it could be a self-signed cert, it could be, you know what I mean? And you can add that to the cluster to verify these things, but actually man in the middling yourself, I have no idea how to get around that. I don't know if we have anybody doing that. So
yeah, I think what they're doing is they're rewriting all the certs, so they have their own private certificate authority, essentially, where they would write a cert for aws.amazon.com. And yes, I said this is the real cert. And it's like, that just doesn't seem like a good idea. But
yeah, like that almost to me sounds like, I mean, that is a weird networking issue that I don't really know a whole lot about. But like, to me, it sounds like they should start using custom certs. But I don't know how the translation would work.
Well, they did do like so they set the cert, they set the custom cert, or the certificate authority. But there's a part in the code right now in the object store plugin where it goes to like automatically retrieve the region, and we're not passing the cert in. And it's like, okay, that, we could probably fix that, but where it's going to be whack-a-mole with, things that don't work. So that's what I'm just trying to figure out, how much whack-a-mole should we play? Okay, so thanks, Sean, and anybody else has any input, it'd be very useful. Thanks.
Awesome. With that, we're out of discussion topics for today. So we got one thing left to do, and that is the contributor shoutouts. Nolan.
Hey, so first, we got a really helpful contribution from Madav, where this specifies kind of what encryption is present within Velero in the backups. So it's just clarifying a question we've gotten semi-often. So this just gives us a good place to point to. Very short version. Velero doesn't encrypt stuff itself. It relies on HTTPS transfer and your object store to do encryption at rest. So it's just clarifying the current state of things. Aslafy, I'm sorry, I'm Zadkiel. I'm sorry, I'm butchering this. Honestly, I don't think I saw this change. So, a small comment fix. Thank you very much. And then we have Aristosovo that is updating, I believe this is documentation. It's been a little while since I've looked at this. Yeah, it's updating some security documentation for Azure storage. So thank you very much. We appreciate that contribution. Awesome. And that is it for this week. Thank you everyone for joining the community call today. Have a fantastic week, rest of the week, everyone, and see you all next week. Bye.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.